Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my series on healing the divine masculine, my personal journey. This is David. It's been a while, it's been a few weeks. This is a series based on my personal life journey. I've experienced a lot and learned a lot in 67 years. I wanted to share what I've learned with younger men so that they may benefit. We all have a story to tell, and we can rewrite our story. We must all find our own path, and I hope you enjoy this journey with me. This week's topic is on rites of passage from boyhood to manhood. Here's a list of the topics that I'm going to go through. The definition, what is the rites of passage, some example rites, boyhood to manhood, a look at Earth Mother cultures versus modern culture, the results of modern birth practices, an archetypal view of the rites of passage, some historical changes that have occurred, a section from another book. It's called Going from the Mother's House to the Father's House. And then I'll talk a little bit about my journey in rites, an event that I call the baptism. And then we'll talk about how the journey continues and finally, what can we do as men in this modern society? So the definition comes from what appears to be the book that defined this topic. It is called The Rites of Passage, written by Arnold van Gennep. It's a very interesting but difficult read because it's an academic kind of book, and he gets into a lot of detail about a lot of different societies. Mostly, I would say either they were tribal societies. It's very, very detailed. Originally published about 1909, and it was published in French. The second edition in English was published in 1960. There's an introduction to the book by a guy named David Kurtzer, and this is what he has to say. The notion that an individual's life consists of a series of transitions structured by the society one lives in, and that these consist of three stages: separation from the old role, a liminal period between roles, and then the assumption of the new role, has become so commonplace that relatively few who use the phrase are aware of its origin. I believe that was in the 1960 version published in English. Since these original ideas, were written over 100 years ago, it's safe to say that the concept of the three stages has disappeared from our modern society, as has the term rite of passage. The author of the book makes some interesting comments in the opening chapter. He says, quote, "So great is the incompatibility between the profane and the sacred worlds that a man cannot pass from one to the other without going through an intermediate stage." And he also says, as we move downward on the scale of civilizations, taking the term civilization in the broadest sense, we cannot fail to note an ever-increasing domination of the secular by the sacred. We see that in the least advanced cultures, the holy enters nearly every phase of a man's life. Think about this now. What is he saying here? We in the Western world consider ourselves at the top of the scale of civilizations. We are supposedly the most advanced, basically because we can destroy anything at any moment. And we have completely taken the holy out of our society. While what remains of the tribal cultures, the Earth Mother cultures, as they call them in some of these books, they look at the world, and watch some of the stuff on from Wally of the Navajo tribe, the Dene out in the Four Corners area. He's got a YouTube channel, and he talks about the holy people. And what he says is basically what they're saying is the concept of the holy, the creator, is in every phase of life. And we in the West have basically taken it completely out, taken God out of life. That's what they're saying here. The first part, so great is the incompatibility, really talks about someone who becomes awakened moving from the secular world to an awakened state. I see this a lot on some of the groups on the internet, social media. There's an intermediary stage that people go through, and as they struggle with, and I just had this conversation with somebody the other day about we have to learn how to walk in both worlds, and it takes practice. It takes practice, but that's what the shamans talk about, walking in both worlds. In order to pass from the profane world to the sacred world, one must pass through an intermediate stage. It's analogous to passing through a dark night of the soul, the subject of the last video, where the dark night is the intermediate stage. So, the rites of passage, there are three phases according to the author. Rites of passage where you're removed from the old environment. He calls it the next phase is the rite of the margin, the intermediate nowhere period, and the rite of incorporation, reintegration into society in a new role. And I've gone through this a few times in my life. Actually, just went through it recently. These are combined as part of a larger process considered an initiation. Could be into a totem group or into just an initiation into manhood. Could be an initiation into a secret society. Could be a lot of things. Some example rites from our Christian world might include baptism, first communion, confirmation, school graduation, marriage, childbirth, funerals. So let's take marriage as an example. The marriage, the separation occurs when the young man asks for the woman's hand in marriage. He is separating himself from the mother, where the love for the feminine, which has been directed basically to his mother in most cases, is now being directed to his betrothed, to his woman that he loves. So that's the separation that goes on there. Then he walks into the area. Then now we're in the area of the intermediate area, the margin. That time before the ceremony, where all the planning is going on, and but as I've been through this, and as men, we tend to watch this more than we participate. But inside of his mind, he is probably trying to ignore some fear. Is this what I really want? Is this, there's a lot going on inside the man's mind at that time. And finally, the incorporation happens where we begin with that famous phrase, until death do we part, in the ceremony, and this is where we're shifting to his new role in society as the husband. Now I want to talk about boyhood to manhood. This is the rite of passage that I'm focused on here. This is the one that I've been focused on for quite some time. For some reason, I just felt it was so important. It's something that has faded from our modern society. We don't talk about this in our culture. So, from the book Earth Honoring, The New Male Sexuality by a guy named Robert Lawlor, just passed away a year or two ago. This path was practiced in Earth Mother cultures. He uses that phrase, Earth Mother cultures. The boy is taken from the mother permanently, usually between the ages of 8 and 14, and goes to live with men. Separated from the mother's field of influence, he enters male society and male initiations. He first has sexual initiations and learns a degree of control over his sexual emissions. And this is followed by vocational, spiritual, and cosmological initiations, all designed to strengthen his masculine identity. So if you can imagine what this is saying, because boy, I sure didn't go through any of this, and I doubt any of you did either. But he's being counseled every day by the elders about what's happening to his body physically and emotionally, and how to control his physical emissions, as they say here, and also his emotions. In other words, how to breathe. There's a comparison that he goes through in this Earth Mother culture versus the modern culture that I wanted to put together here. In the Earth Mother culture, at birth, the child is placed in the mother's arms. In our culture, there's an immediate cycle of alienation, loneliness, and fear. In the Earth Mother culture, the child and the mother remain in physical contact for at least 6 to 8 months, while in our modern society, the newborn is snatched and placed into the hands of doctors and nurses. In the Earth Mother culture, the child is never denied the sound of the mother's heartbeat, while in our modern culture, the child is enclosed and isolated in cribs and playpens. In the Earth Mother culture, the child experiences the mother's busy physical life. The child is part of that life. While in the modern culture, their child is jabbed with toxic chemicals. In the Earth Mother culture, the continuum is never broken. There's just that first year, the child is always with the mother. While in our modern culture, the child is completely disengaged from the human continuum, away from the stream of life. The mother goes about her daily business or goes to work and leaves them with daycare, and the child is put into the playpen and almost like in a jail. The results of this modern birth practices Robert Lawlor talks about is we share what he calls ailments of the continuum. Self-hate and self-doubt are very common ailments of this continuum. The quest for in-arms experience takes many forms and leads to subconscious searches and substitutions, such as sex, alcohol, and drugs. This one really made a lot of sense and really resonated with me. This quest for in-arm experience, this quest for mother's love. Happiness ceases to be a normal condition of being alive and becomes a goal. Think about this. This is the quote from our our Declaration of Independence: the pursuit of happiness. Why isn't happiness the normal condition? Because in our modern society, we're stripped away from the mother. That's what he's saying here. So next, we'll take an archetypal view very quickly here. This is a quote from a gentleman named Whitman who wrote "Return of the Goddess," as quoted in the book Earth Honoring by Robert Lawlor. Quote, behind every mass movement or change in the pattern of society, there is an archetype which acts on the imagination of people. So in the 1960s, the US economy changed from being a production economy to a consumer economy. This caused a mutation in the divine king archetype into what he calls the demented king. So let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, so here's a comparison now of the divine and the demented king. The divine king had basically what we used to call the Protestant work ethic, if you're old enough to remember that term. Whereas in today's world, the demented king is the pursuit of material possessions. And I will give you a quote from the early 1980s. I never forget this. The baby boomers found Wall Street. Ronald Reagan gets elected president, and they in the 70s disassociated the dollar from gold, and in the 1980s they opened up the money spigot, and the spending went wild from the baby boomers. And there was a phrase at that time, and that phrase was, he who dies with the most toys wins. This is a perfect example of the change from this divine king to the demented king. The divine king is noble, while the demented king has indulgent satiation of desire and greed. In other words, can never get enough. He who dies with the most toys wins. The divine king is self-sacrificing and saves money, while the demented king is about spending money. And if you think about how much our money has lost value over the last 100 or so years, saving money is a punishment, and the system is built for that, to punish us for saving. The divine king was a producer, while the demented king is a consumer. The divine king lived in a spiritual world, whereas we talked about earlier, spirituality was a part of every phase of life, every facet of life. Whereas with the Demented King, it's the materialistic world. And boy, are we seeing a lot of that these days. Some of the historical changes that he talks about, and I've mentioned this one before, is from his Earth Honoring book. Quote, in the 300 years since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, factory, clerical, and retail employment has not represented liberation for males. Okay, this was written 1989. On the contrary, he says, it turned males into drones and wage slaves. Can we really believe that this vast economic manipulation will ultimately constitute liberation for the female? No, we can't. Um, Wage slaves. Boy, you can go right back to Henry Ford and the production line for that one. Drones and wage slaves just do the same thing every day over and over and over again. This ties into what I said in an earlier video about an epidemic of abandonment issues beginning when the Industrial Revolution took the father off the farm and away from the sons. You can see that this Industrial Revolution, while giving us an awful lot of goods, a lot of material goods, has had quite an effect on men, their relationship with their sons, and over many generations now, we're really seeing the effect of this, and it's not a good effect. In the book Iron John, which was one of the seminal works on manhood, Robert Bly's book, published about 1990, there's a section in there called "Going from the Mother's House to the Father's House." And it runs along the same lines. He says, quote, most cultures describe the first stage of initiation as a sharp and clean break with the mother. Old men simply go into the woman's compounds with spears one day when the boys are between 8 and 12 and take the boys away. So he's talking about Earth Mother cultures here. The mothers do not oppose the initiatory work with the boys, but participate enthusiastically and sadly in the drama of it. Okay, so the mothers are torn because they know they're losing their sons. The sons have to go live with the boys or go live with the men. And what the mothers will say, and what the mothers have been quoted as saying, is that a boy cannot change into a man without the active intervention of the older men. And I firmly believe this. And I had a conversation with somebody not too long ago on a social media site. She had raised her son, and she said, "Yeah, he's a very good man." And I thought to myself, I wasn't going to argue with her. But I thought to myself, well, yeah, he's probably a nice guy, and we'll find him in one of our nice guy men's groups someday. Hopefully not, but I firmly believe that a boy cannot change into a man without the active intervention of the older men. And of course, I'm projecting myself here, so others may have different experience. But I think we're seeing the effect of that all across our society. Continuing on, he says the first stage is the clean break with the mother, and a part of the boy dies when this happens. The next stage is to be led by the elders to join what he calls the beneath father, symbolized by the snake and associated with the spinal cord. This is where the ancestors live. He learns to look at the death side of things. And the initiation asks the son to move his love energy away from the safe, attractive mother to the relatively unattractive serpent father. In other words, he's taken away from the mother, the clean break, and he's going off into the unknown with the men. And he's symbolized by the snake, the beneath father. He's going to learn about what the ancestors. So now you're talking about societies where they would sit around the campfire and tell stories. Everything was done verbally. And he would have to learn to look at the death side of things. He'd have to learn they'd go out on the hunt, how to kill and clean an animal, right? This stage is regarded as a holy thing, and in the book he calls this ashes work. The boy has increasing his tolerance for ashes. He eats the dust as snakes do. He increases his stomach for terrifying insights. He deepens his ability to digest the evil facts of history. He accepts the job of working 7 years under the ground. And of course, all of this is symbolic of the path from boyhood to manhood. What he's saying here is that the boy has to get dirty. He's got to do things that he may not enjoy in the beginning, but that are a part of his life and his survival and his role as a man. And that this is a 7 year initiation into manhood. And that's what these older civilizations, these older groups did. We don't do any of that anymore, do we? What do? We go to school to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. Big, big difference, isn't it? And we're seeing it with the men in our society. So, talk about my journey in rights growing up without a father. There was only my mother. My clean break occurred when my mother passed away in November 2009. This was my rite of separation. I hope other young men do not have to wait for this event. It's the whole purpose of putting all these presentations together, as you can tell. It is no coincidence that my awakening began 6 weeks later in January 2010. There were no elders to guide or tutor me, the elders in my family or my tribe. There were books and interviews and sessions with various mediums and psychics, and I've talked about this in previous videos. And there were trips to sacred places. In 2018, I did the ceremonial rites of the Munay Ki. This is something I discovered while studying the work of Dr. Alberto Vialdo. Um, he received these from the shamans in the Andes Mountains. I practiced these nightly for a period of a couple of months as part of a small group that met on weekends. And what he says about this quote is the prophecies of the ancient Americas speak about a time of cataclysmic transformation and a new human appearing on the planet. Persons of wisdom and power who live free of fear and abide in their eternal nature, called Homo Luminous, the light bearer, the light warrior, the light man. The rites of the Munay Ki upgrade your luminous energy field so you can become this new human. The energetic transmissions heal the karmic and genetic wounds and beliefs you inherited. They enable you to grow a new body that ages, heals, and dies differently. This is very important. We're talking about healing genetic wounds, karmic wounds, things we inherited. This is what I've talked about, healing the lineage. Okay, we can think of it as transforming these energies, emotional energies, and beliefs that are lodged in our body and transforming them into healing energy for our body. My body's literally moving as I'm saying this. So that we can grow a new body and dies differently. We want to die consciously. I see my old video about living consciously, dying consciously. So that was 2018. In 2019 is when I went to Costa Rica and Rhythmia 3 times to do ayahuasca. And the third time I came back, which was right before the first of the year, it was late December 2019, I came up with this crazy idea. And I call it the baptism. So at the time, I was living in Michigan, following some Wim Hof cold water therapy by taking ice cold showers in the morning. I would do, in Michigan, it's easy to do an ice cold shower in the wintertime. And I would do 5 minutes under the ice cold water in the mornings. So on January 1st, this was about probably 3 or 4 days after I got home from Costa Rica. On January 1st, 2020, I drove up to Lexington, Michigan. It's about 90-minute drive from where I was living, which is on the shores of Lake Huron. And at about 11 a.m., I went for a swim in Lake Huron. The outside temperature was 31 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind was blowing, and the water had some ice on it. The water was not much warmer. As I was moving from one phase of life to another, I called this my baptism. Basically, I went out into the water, felt like at first like a million needles sticking in you. Went under the water, sat there for a short period of time, maybe about a minute or so, and then came back out, wrapped a towel around me. But after 3 trips to Costa Rica and falling in love on the last trip, I was moving into a new phase of life. And so it's no coincidence that it was literally 10 years to the day from my awakening, which was January 1st, 2010, when I quit drinking on January 2nd, 2010. Here we are exactly 1 year later, or 10 years later, exactly to the day when I did this baptism. There are no coincidences. But I knew I was moving into a new phase of life, while at the same time, if you go back to the previous video, I was also at that time going through a dark night of the soul. So all this can happen in parallel. But I knew that at this moment, after this baptism, that a part of I had been reborn. When I was in Rhythmia, that third trip, December, just before Christmas, I had 7 what they call death experiences in the five nights, 4 nights of ayahuasca and 1 night of breathwork. I died 7 times in those 5 nights. And this was all connected. The deaths, the baptism. I had a large part of me had fallen away, and I was being reborn. And the journey continues. So as I look back on all this, I can see the various times in life that would qualify as rites of passage and initiations. I believe that this never ends. There's going to be more initiations and more rites will occur. So, what can we do today as men in today's modern world? What can we do to mimic the Earth Mother culture's rites of passage, initiations, etc.? I tried to think of this. This is this is one reason why this presentation took me 3 weeks to put together, because there was really a lot to this, and I wanted to give it a lot of thought. But we have to get creative by creating our own ceremonies. I believe this is very important for men to create their own ceremonies, and even couples to create their own ceremonies. And you can call it date night, things like that, but to really create our own ceremonies of life. As one example, in the book Quest, a guide for creating your own vision quest by Denise Linn, who I got to see live when I was on the Hay House Caribbean cruise in 2012. She's got her and her daughter wrote this. There are ideas for creating your own rites of passage. And another book that I found, but I have not read, I just found it last week. It was called The International Father. For any of you with sons or grandsons, this might be a good one because it did come up with some great reviews. One thing that I did on my property here in Appalachia, Southwest North Carolina, is I had to cut down this very large white pine tree that was very close to the house. He was the king of the forest. He was the largest tree on the lot. And I took all the pieces and cut them up into, they were probably about 24 inches long. And I placed them creating a sacred circle around the yard behind my house. I did this to honor the tree because he was so majestic when I first bought this place. And he's created this sacred space behind my house. All right. The other thing that I did then, just outside of that, was I created another sacred circle using stones that I found on the property. And that became my sacred fire pit. Now, I've had people come on my property. I had a guy who came to do some work for me, and he brought his wife with him. And the next time he came out, he told me that his wife said to him, did you feel how friendly his property felt? Which was a great compliment. She didn't come in the house either. She just felt it from outside on the driveway and just walking around. It's a little half-acre lot. And another guy who was an acquaintance who came in the house one time, the first thing he said was, "It feels very warm in here." Um, this is what happens when we create sacred spaces, and I did a video on that, why we want to create sacred spaces. But these are some of the things that we can do as men to go through this initiation process from boyhood to manhood. Another idea, and I think she's got this part of that book, Vision Quest. And there actually are quite a few books. If you go on to Amazon, there's quite a few books. Just look up Vision Quest as the title. But if we go camping for 3 days, create a sacred circle around the campsite, just with stones and wood that are right there, and set the intention to make this a 3 day living, death, and resurrection. So leave the technology off. Just sit and enjoy nature. This 3 day living, death, and resurrection is something that was practiced in many places around the ancient world, according to researcher Freddie Silva. I think he's got a video on it too. I'm going to put a link to one of his videos. He puts all of his stuff up on Vimeo, but he's got, you might be able to find it on Gaia too. But one of the things that I do is I just ask for guidance. The whole time that I've been here, 2.5 years, asking for guidance about what to do. And that's where I came up with these ideas of building sacred circles with the tree and with the stones and things like that. Um, just got to sit quietly and ask for guidance. All right, so this is the end. Here's a list of all the topics we went over. It was a lot. In summary, this presentation could have been hours long. There's so much that I wanted to communicate, as it took me 3 weeks to put all this together. This is one of the most important topics of manhood, in my opinion, and about healing the divine masculine. I hope that something resonated with you and that you were able to get some insights into your own life experiences. If something does resonate, sit with it for a while and ask for guidance. Okay? I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I know it's a lot in a short time. I wanted to share this important segment of the journey with you. The next one will be in about a week or two. I think I'm going to do archetypes because it kind of came right out of this one. Since when I was doing that archetypal view slide, some things came out of that, and I actually started the next presentation. So I'll do that on archetypes. Meanwhile, enjoy each and every day. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful week.